Hello and welcome to Pocket Rock. In today's video I am continuing my series ranking each of the tracks from Paul McCartney's solo releases. I've so far covered from McCartney, his debut, all the way through to Wings at the Speed of Sound, which means I am now on to the 8th in the series, which is London Town, Wings' 6th album. This was released in 1978 and its production was somewhat troubled. So the band headed out as a 5-piece after some initial recording sessions in London to the British Virgin Islands, where they were recording on a boat called the Fair Carol. They headed back to the UK, and at this point they discovered that Linda was pregnant with McCartney's 3rd child, and things were put on hiatus a bit. In the meantime, Jimmy McCulloch left the band, as did the drummer Joe English. He was homesick, he went back to the US, and they were reduced to a 3-piece again. The child was born, they headed back into the studio in London and did some more recording. And we get this hodgepodge of an album, which is London Town. So straight up, this is an album that I've got a long history with. And there were times when I used to really rate this very highly, but those times are much in the past. It's a muddy album. It's too long. It's well over 50 minutes. And the grooves are on the record are somewhat closer together, and it makes the sound, you lose a lot of definition. This is an album I think shines better on CD, and I really want an archive for it. So before we dive into those waters of the British Virgin Islands, I'll just remind you to click the like, hit the subscribe and the bell to receive notifications of future content. And at number 14, I have started off with Girlfriend. Now, there was a time when I used to quite like this song, and knowing that Michael Jackson recorded this, especially as it had been written for him, gave it a little bit of a mystique. Over time, I've come to loathe almost everything about it. I don't like Paul's falsetto vocals. They kind of grate. It's got some pretty melody to it, I suppose, and having heard Michael's version as well, I like it even less. It's a song that I wish didn't exist, and whilst it's nowhere near as bad as something like Cook of the House off the previous record, it's still it's not a track that I would say to anyone who is unsure about McCartney, go and listen to Girlfriend. It'll really blow your mind. It's on a par with the track I'm putting next, which is at number 13, which is Cufflink. Now, Cufflink is an instrumental, and it's very little in it of any merit that warrants including on London Town and saying, oh, this has got to be heard. Let's cram those grooves closer together and wreck the production of the record by including Cufflink. It doesn't need to be here. Number 13. At number 12, I have placed Name and Address. So Name and Address is a bit of a rockabilly style song. It's got a slightly Elvis-y feel. There's nothing wrong with it. There's equally nothing right with it. It's got a false ending where the song kind of breaks down. I'm kind of quite pleased about that because it could have just gone on and on and on. At number 11, I've placed Backwards Traveller. Now, the best thing I can say about this is it's short. It doesn't overstay its welcome. Not that it gets much of a welcome. It segues into Cufflink. You could argue the two things are two halves of the same piece, but Backwards Traveller, number 11. Number 10, I have placed Children, Children. So this is a co-write between Denny and Paul. It's clearly more of a Denny song than it is a Paul song. And both of the clear Denny songs on this record have got children in the title. And this is the lesser of the two. The tune is pretty. It's got some lovely acoustic guitar work on it. If I haven't listened to London Town for a while, I don't think, oh, you know what I really need to hear? I need to hear Children, Children again. It's perfectly fine. At number 9, I have placed the album closer, Morse Moose and the Grey Goose. I have a complicated relationship with this track. In one sense, I feel like it's a retread of 1985. It's got a load of crescendos, but there's a note in this record that grates, and it's that keyboard single note that's constantly pressed. And I guess they're going for a feel of almost like a distress signal, maybe. But it causes it to grate after a while. It's clearly a jam. It's got a lot of energy in it that's sadly lacking from the rest of London Town. But then lurking within the song as well is the Grey Goose part, which is more like a sea shanty, which feels sung by Denny, and I think this is Denny's big contribution to this co-write. I would rather have Grey Goose without the Morse Moose part. Even now, I don't know what I think of Morse Moose and the Grey Goose. I don't know whether I like it or I dislike it, and it's leaves me uncertain. My track number 9. And number 8 is the opening track of the album, which is London Town. Now, this is, I think, one of Paul's best melodies, certainly one of his best of the 70s. But the execution always sounds too soft and muddy. We've got some weird lyrics in there about, I was accosted by a rozzer wearing a pink balloon about his foot. And then there's a toot toot. And it's just, I don't know what they're going for on the track London Town. It's syrupy. The production really lets it down, and it doesn't sound good on the record. It's also got this weird, unsettling feel that I really can't put my finger on. And as a result, the album opener gives me an uncertain feeling about what I'm going to expect from the album. So bearing in mind, I've felt uncertain at the end of the album, and I feel uncertain after the first track of the album. This probably gives some credence as to why I place London Town quite low down on my overall ranking of Paul McCartney albums. It's got a weird opener and a weird closer. At number 7, I've placed I'm Carrying. And from now on, we're starting to get into tracks that I'm really, really fond of. And I'm Carrying is a classically lovely, gossamer thin, beautiful McCartney track. But I'm Carrying is a lovely acoustic number. And bearing in mind this is track 7, we are halfway through my ranking. It does suggest that half of London Town is good to great. Number 6, I've placed Famous Groupies. Now, this song gets a lot of flack because it's a daft, ridiculous, almost children-suitable song, but it's actually about groupie sex. Now, bearing in mind, he's also written a children's song that's about a murderer hitting someone with a silver hammer. This is not by any means off-brand for McCartney. Back at the age of 14, I learnt the word pulchritude, and I also learnt what a proscenium arch was as a result of this song's lyrics. It's fun fluff. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's not going to win any awards, but Famous Groupies is a good time track. Number 5, we come to what I think is Denny's best contribution into London Town, and it's Deliver Your Children. It's the better of his 2 main songs. Again, listening to the vinyl, I think it's muddier than I ever remember it being. The CD, I reckon, cleans it up quite a lot, and I really want to hear this in an archive version when it's given a proper, full, quality remaster. Deliver Your Children, number 5. Number 4 is the second track of the album, what I think would have been a better opener in terms of a bit of an attack to the song. It's Cafe on the Left Bank, recorded in the Virgin Isles. It's an enjoyable track. It's good. Cafe on the Left Bank at number 4. At number 3, I have placed the big hit single, hit number 1 in the US. It is With a Little Luck. I've known this as long as I've been a McCartney fan because it was part of All the Best. But I do think it's a little bit wimpy, if I'm honest. It's recorded in the Virgin Isles, and yet I cannot hear what on earth on this song Jimmy McCulloch would have actually played. It's very synth heavy. It's a good track. Don't get me wrong. I do think With a Little Luck is top draw McCartney stuff. Personally, I prefer the radio edit version that was out in America and you can get on the Wingspan compilation. And one of the reasons behind that is I first heard this in 1987 on All the Best. And the synthesizer bit sounds to me so much like the theme tune from the original Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends that I can't not hear that. With a Little Luck, number 3. And number 2, I have placed Don't Let It Bring You Down. This, I think, is absolutely top draw, great McCartney. There is a version of this on the Pure McCartney CDs where it's been fully remastered, and apparently it sounds terrific. I've yet to hear it, but it makes me really, really anticipate the inevitable archive we've got to get of London Town. Firstly, the flageolet is beautiful on it. The sentiment is great. It feels like a perfect song for now. Don't let it bring you down. And the final couplet, the Wings harmonies on the when the price is hard to pay moment are just divine. And I think it's possibly the best Wings harmonies of Paul, Linda and Denny that you will hear at any point. It's gorgeous. Don't let it bring you down. And it was a close run thing for this to be placed at number one. But Don't Let It Bring You Down is an absolutely beautiful track. It's a wonderful hidden McCartney classic. It needs the archive. Which leads me to number one, which is I've Had Enough. This at one point was one of my lowest rated tracks on the album because I wasn't into the hard rock things, but boy does London Town need a hard rock track. And I've had enough with the vehemence and the anger that's kind of feels like it's in the lyrics is just great. This is where, if there was more of I've Had Enough on London Town, more of the Jimmy McCulloch guitar parts that clearly mark this track out, I'd probably rate London Town so much higher. These top two tracks are what, for me, really saves London Town and means it's worth owning. So that concludes my rundown of the tracks of London Town. Overall, it's very uneven as a listen through. I've heard it described as rank, and I think that's unfair. I don't think it's bad, but it is rank and file. And there's so much that could be done with London Town that would make it better. Waterspout was left off it, and Waterspout would actually potentially lay claim to the best track on the record, and it's still not released to this day. We've also got Mull of Kintyre and Girls' School, the single that was released in 1977 and sold by the bucket load. I mean, 2.6 million copies in the UK, both of which would have enhanced London Town. So at some point, I am going to do a reimagined on London Town because there is a top draw Wings album in the sessions that built this record. But the actual London Town, isn't it? Just remind you to like, subscribe and hit the bell, and I'll see you in a week.